night of total terror. Night of the living dead.
Hi, my name is Tom Brown. I am standing in the Evans City Cemetery. This is where the opening of the classic film Night of the Living Dead was filmed. I first heard about Night of the Living Dead in 1969. I was 14 years old. I had a brand new aunt. She just came in from Los Angeles, and she proceeded to tell me, having learned that I was the monster fantasy horror nut in the family, she told me about this dark and scary and creepy movie, this bloody and violent film, this movie that even showed people eating other people. Of course, I wanted to see Night of the Living Dead really bad. And of course, she told my parents not to let me see it. Of course, I eventually did see Night of the Living Dead, and my life has never been the same since. I would never have believed back in 1969 that several years later I would be part of this, a tribute to Night of the Living Dead, the folks that brought it to you, the people that made the film, the greatest horror film ever made.
How did the Night of the Living Dead come about?
George and I were having lunch in a tavern around the corner from the late Dimage Company where we all worked. Remember? We were in Sam Rini's eating grilled provolone sandwiches and sipping beer with Richard Ritchie and complaining about the commercial jobs that we lost, how fickle the advertising agencies were. And I turned to you and Richard and said, what if we get 10 of us together just the people that work at Latent Image and a few of our friends, we'd just get 10 people, and each of us kick in $600. Even if we have to borrow the money, we'd have $6,000. We should be able to make a movie on that, or at least, you know, get it down to a work print. Shoot it in 35, print it in 16, and we should be able to do a better movie than those things with rubber masks that we've all seen. And
I like those things.
Yeah, those
rubber
rubber
masks.
masks. I think it's interesting, though, to consider from a point of view of, first of all, not having very much money to work with, and secondly, then to get together, cobble together whatever little money you can to make some kind of movie that you could almost certainly sell to someone.
Hopefully, yes.
The horror thing was almost backed into in that way. I know that one of the rationales was that if Bill Cardille, if someone bought those movies that were on Chiller Theater at that time, someone would certainly buy anything that we could do.
Yeah, that was part of the rationale.
Yeah, I mean, I think important to say, too, that initially we wanted to make a movie.
Right.
And we backed into horror after we tried to talk to various people about other things.
We didn't know anyone who had any horses, so that Western was
Western
out.
was out. No one listened whenever we would talk about something else.
And why didn't we shoot in color? Who wants to explain that one?
Well, we did talk at one point about converting to 16 millimeter color, but then decided,
Wasn't it essentially the fact that we couldn't afford
initially it was, but
No.
I don't think ultimately that was, because then when we raised the extra dough, I mean, unless I'm remembering it wrong, wasn't there a point where we decided, well, all we'd have to reshoot is a little bit of stuff and we could switch to color 16?
There were a number of considerations like that eventually somehow got committed out of the production. Shooting a different ending, you know, was the ending too much of a downer?
yes.
There were a couple of instances
Oh, that
like
was
that.
long after.
Yeah.
I mean, even
That was well after that.
when Russ and I drove to New York with the first print in the car, and the first people that looked at it were Columbia Pictures, and they wanted us to change the ending, and we did, you know, sort of bravely say, "Get out of my life," to a couple of people.
Are you people crazy?
Right. Then about 6 months later, we were calling them back and saying, "Can we make a deal?"
How would you like that ending changed,
The
sir?
lady holding the torch. We've thought about it. We talked it over with our friends, and yes, we'll do anything you want.
It's terror, nightmares, and a good time, actually, and a classic title.
How nervous it made me when I first saw it. My father took me, I was pretty old then, I mean I didn't need my father to take me, but we went to the movies together to see Play Misty for Me, which was the movie that was the A picture. And Play Misty for Me put my stomach into knots. Then my father, who didn't want to see this Night of the Living Dead, said, "I'm going to a bar, I'll meet you out in front of the movie theater when this is over." And coming off of Play Misty for Me and then going right into Night of the Living Dead was really unnerving and really unsettling.
And I had been told what a great movie Night of the Living Dead was. And I said, well, I'll go see it. So I went to see it. And I was very taken with it because almost everything about it is attractive. I mean, the politics of it were striking at the time to have a black lead. And that's not commented on the fact that he's black. Also to kill him. You know, the clear anti-communist hysteria that's running through that film, all the stuff about guns and hunters and gun control, the dynamics of the family. And there was so much going on in the movie that it wasn't your typical horror film. The black and white photography, the handheld jerkiness of a lot of the shots, it's one of those movies where the circumstances under which it was filmed helped it. Helped even the bad, like, news guy and stuff, it helped the reality of it.
The horror that I felt when I first saw the picture. I was very young, and I saw it with my sister, Andrea. She took me to see it, and it was on a double bill with Freaks, so it was a double mind blower for me as a kid. And I was so scared, my stomach got tied up in a terrible knot, and I had just never experienced any kind of fear like it in my entire life.
Screaming in New York. When I very first was thinking about making a scary movie, I was just in New York learning the film business, and was still working on my first very preliminary films as an assistant editor when I was dragged by friends to go see Night of the Living Dead at the Waverly down on the Lower East Side. And I really thought it was kind of a stupid idea. You know, I was not somebody who set off to make scary films. So as far as I was concerned, they you know, were something that I had not seen much of and were probably pretty dumb. And instead, in the first 3 minutes, I found myself, along with everybody else in the audience, screaming and laughing and jumping and cringing, and realized that you know, a scary film could be a lot of fun and very stylishly made, and even have a you know, some sort of a political underlying statement behind it that was you know, made you think a little bit.
Actually, I was thinking about this because I knew you were going to ask a question like this, and what reminds me is when I was about like 8 years old, because I grew up in the Bay Area, and there was this TV show called Creature Features, hosted by Bob Wilkins from this Oakland station, and it was the horror movie show that they had on Saturday nights. And on the opening of the show, they had like clips from all these horror films, but the one that scared me the most was from Night of the Living Dead. And it was the part when they go up the stairs and they find the body that was devoured, and there's that big zoom in on the face. And that every time it's like the credits would come on and that big zoom in came in. Whoa, I almost fell backwards. And the big zoom would come in, and I'd always just basically shit my pants right there. I don't know. That always just scared me.
I also was greatly encouraged by it because it was a regional film. It was made by a bunch of guys in, you know, Pennsylvania. And I was thinking, gee, that's kind of neat. And my first film, Schlock, which I made in L.A. for $60,000, I was encouraged because I said, well, if they can do it, you know, I mean, guys, let's put on a show like Judy and Mickey, you know, get the money together. But the movie really struck me mainly because I thought it was really scary. And even now, I think there's power in it. There's scenes that are just so cleverly, I mean, I don't know if it's designed or happenstance, but for instance, the father of the family, you know, they have the fact that he's such a jerk. He's right, by the way. I mean, at the end of the movie, you realize he was right. He was right, you know. And the image of the daughter eating the mother, you know, it's like, ah! I mean, there's just stuff in that picture. To have the lead, similar to the way Hitchcock killed off Janet Leigh, I think even bolder is to have your lead go catatonic. I mean, there's just it's a movie that surprised and kept surprising.
I was watching TV late at night, and I remember this movie coming on. I can't remember, I was very young, and I was 11 years old actually, and I remember watching the movie on TV late at night, and when it first came on, and the car driving up the road in black and white, I knew I was in store for a pretty spooky movie, because just the whole tone from the first frame just pretty much gave me the heebie-jeebies.
Well, while he was having his diapers changed, I remember having many a sleepover with several friends. We would stay up and watch the film, you know, whatever creature feature it was on, and we'd have popcorn and get really scared. And I remember not being able to go to sleep at night.
Gritty black and white, noirish, evil, insidious, basically horror, I think, would be the one adjective used to perfectly describe.
Well, first of all, whenever we were talking about $6,000, Richard Ritchie said, "You guys are crazy. You'll never make a movie. I can't believe I'm hearing this." And we said, "Does that mean that you want out?" And he said, "Oh, no, I'm in." So he come up with his $600, and we went back to the studio, and we talked to Russ,
He was one of the
Oh,
only
yeah.
guys that had $600 in his
Yeah.
That's right. He had a real job.
The rest of us had to borrow the money from parents and finance companies and so on. But Russ said, "Sure, I'm in. I'll spend the afternoon working out some figures." And he got done, and he comes out with this gloomy look on his face, and he says, "I got some real bad news. We can't do it for $6,000. It's going to cost $12,000."
Oh, no.
We said, "There goes the movie." No movie.
That's a story I didn't know. Originally,
Yeah.
you came up with double what we had, huh?
Well, we had Image 10, the 10 people that kicked in 600
Right.
each. That was the 6,000. And George was in utter gloom. He said, it's all down the drain because if we bring in another 10 people for another 600, there's no percentage left. There's no profits for anybody. And that's when we hit on the idea, well, the first 10 people like you and Marilyn Eastman and so on, those people were going to contribute not only money, but they were going to work on the picture in important ways. So those people deserved a higher percentage than the second 10, and that's how we brought the second 10 in at a reduced percentage, so there was some money left over for the hoped for profits.
I mean, it also have to say that by the time we were done, it cost more than $12,000.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
114,000.
Yeah.
114?
Yeah, with the deferments.
But the amount of cash was like around 70.
Yeah, between 60 and 70 somewhere, which is still, I mean, bargain basement, even, $1967, that's still pretty unheard of.
Dirt cheap.
Also important to say that you can't just raise $6,000 and go out and make a movie. I mean, we had equipment and know-how, and between us, between your equipment, our equipment, we had two separate companies. We didn't have to go rent stuff. We knew how to use the stuff. You guys did the makeup. I mean, half the staff, half the production credits are represented here now in these four people. And
That's
there were
true.
four other people that did the rest. And then there was a lawyer. One of the guys was a lawyer.
Well, it was like the very week that we bought our first 35 millimeter camera was the week that we were sitting there in the bar, and now we had everything we needed, including the camera.
And that was a used camera, wasn't it?
It was a used,
Sure.
a heavy 80-pound blimp 35 millimeter camera. That remember the burden that it was?
Yeah, very well.
Just setting up shots and getting the lenses in that thing, and just transporting it from one area of the house to the next.
That's a recollection. Although the equipment was clumsy and awkward, at the time there was so much energy, you hardly don't remember it as being an encumbrance. It was our stuff.
He also didn't think he'd get the role because Rudy Ritchie was going to play that role originally.
Yeah.
He was one of our friends and shareholders, and Dwayne just assumed, well, you're white, you're a shareholder, and you're a close friend of these guys, and I'm not going to get the part. And he was actually stunned when he got the part.
Yeah, he
But
was
Dwayne
visiting from New York, visiting his family in Duquesne.
But you guys
He
knew
was
him,
also a
didn't you?
friend.
No, Mary Ellen knew him.
Mary Ellen Hawley knew him. So he was a friend of a mutual friend.
Yeah.
I see, okay.
I think it wasn't until when he did his big table scene that, ripping the table apart and all that, which was his big speech. And there was this big catharsis that day when he suddenly realized that all of us were pulling for him and we were all in this together.
Yeah.
And up to that moment, he still felt like an outsider. Maybe.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
And
That was
after
too bad.
that, he just collapsed in tears and went around shaking our hands and hugging us, and he realized that white, black, or whatever, we were
Right. At
all
first he thought he would never get the role, and then he thought, was he being exploited to something? I mean, he went through all those changes.
Exactly.
About, and then finally realized, hey, we're just making a movie. Or we're all sort of trying to, get this.
Yeah, the color
Good
didn't
night.
have anything to do
No.
with it.
No, it
That's
didn't.
the simple
No.
fact of it.
Repeating this latest bulletin just received moments ago from Cumberland, Maryland, civil defense authorities have told newsmen that murder victims show evidence of having been partially devoured by their murderers. Medical examination of victims' bodies shows conclusively that the killers are eating the flesh of the people they kill.
That was a thing that sort of evolved, and it got harder and harder and heavier and heavier. We did initially say we're going to go a little further than these other movies go. But then we kept watching dailies and realized we weren't, maybe we could go another inch, maybe we could go another inch. In the end, the last shoot that we went out and did was almost specifically to, we were filling some plot points too, but we went out specifically to get a few more graphic shots. I mean, you look at the film now and it looks really tame.
Oh, compared with what's
compared with
Well, we knew that
available
we
since?
had to be
Sure.
iconoclastic with the picture. We figured maybe nobody would want to distribute it, and we'd end up carrying it by hand to the various drive-in theaters and selling it that way. So we wanted to make sure it would get noticed. So we were always breaking new ground intentionally and forcing the picture into more daring areas than other films had gone.
One of the things that, speaking of the gore, that led to what we did there was the fact that one of the people involved, Ross Harris, had a chain of meat stores. Butcher shops is what they're called, meat stores. Butcher shop. And Ross went out to slaughterhouses and bought product. And he said, listen, I can get entrails, I can get livers. He said, I can get anything you want from when I go to the slaughterhouse. And he made good on his promise, and that's why we, one of the reasons we went that way.
It started a whole subgenre. Little did we know.
Yeah.
That's right. I know that one of the things that we talked about early on was not making the special effects, the gunshots and so forth, too ambitious, that whatever we did, we wanted to be able to pull off well.
Right.
And with Reed Servinsky and some of those folks, we were at least able to execute gunshots and bullet holes and that kind of thing.
With good reality.
Again,
with good reality, and I think that all kind of helped the movie too. But then, as George says, you test a little bit with this and eventually ratchet it up to where it is now. But where it is now is so modest compared to what has been done since.
Was today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't do a headshot. They refused to do squibs on the head.
Yeah.
And so every zombie that gets shot in the head gets, you see the reaction,
Right.
and then you cut to an existing
place.
makeup that's
Right.
already there.
Yeah.
The only squibs are on the body.
Right.
Yeah, I think the first one we did that way was Richard Ritchie
Right.
at the window.
At the window.
And he gets shot in the head.
The back of
finally.
the head.
Right.
And that was because he was one of the investors, and he had no choice
didn't
but to put a
matter.
squib on the back of his head.
And that's a good point, Russ.
You mean there's a squib on his head?
Yeah.
Are you
I really must not have been
I
around.
think when he was wrestling with
I thought
the-
we did some sort of a gizmo on the front of his head that wasn't really a
The
squib.
reason you forgot that it was there, and I forgot too until Russ just mentioned it, we had a thing on the front of his head.
Yeah.
But we shot the squib, but it was too dark and it never really registered.
Right.
You barely see it. But the thing I was, like Russ mentioned before about investors helping us go into new areas where, Vince Servinsky's brother Reed came in as an investor and turned out to be a fireworks specialist. And just like Carl's friend, Ross Harris came in and furnished the
I'm a
animal
specialist with
parts.
entrails.
Here
yes.
comes Vince and Reed, and because of having them there, we were able to do the demolitions and the squibs, which we really didn't count on going in.
Well, here's all those shots from 1967 on the makeup that we did.
And here's one of Jack, Jack Russo.
Jack Russo, oh,
Yeah,
over
here
here,
we are.
that was
Better known
that
these
was one
days.
of your better ones.
Yeah.
That was great.
You knew that the genesis of this makeup, the wounds, that is, was from the Enchanted Cottage when I was a messenger at RKO in Hollywood.
I think that's great. You really liked that movie. because you looked
Yeah.
like you tried to redo
Well,
it.
I used to hang around the makeup department, and I think one of the Westmores was in charge of it at the time, but I'm not really sure. But anyway, they used, on Robert Young's face, they used Dermawax to create the distortion.
Because
on
he
his
was
face.
a war
A
hero.
war hero had been wounded. And so I just absorbed that, and when it came time for Living Dead, I thought, aha, here's a way we get our wounds, our gross wounds. So we searched, found the Dermawax, and the rest is history.
And here you are doing makeup on a couple of the ghouls. Although I did most of the the regular makeup, the straight makeup.
Well, you did it in stages also.
Yeah, oh, it was really interesting the way the makeup sort of progressed. If you watch the film, you'll see that the makeup changes. In the beginning, everybody is a raccoon.
Yeah, yes. Dark eyes, dark circles, and...
Right. And I was doing what I knew then, which was theater makeup, and that was to enhance and to diminish anything that was wrong with the face.
Right.
And then I gradually realized that with a ghoul, you go the opposite way. So if somebody had a big face, you make their face bigger. If somebody has a narrow face, you make their face very narrow and small. If they have little eyes, you make their eyes little beady eyes. So the makeup got better as the movie went on.
And of course, as we progressed with the production, then we had it kind of down to a formula, and we instructed various of the ghouls to put on what we called a base makeup, as Chuck Craig is doing here. And then you went in and finished it with the shading, the rouge, the black, the brown.
And I also did the makeup on the nude.
Oh, that's right.
Which was,
that's right.
yeah, she was too pretty and pink. So we had to cover her with gray.
That's right, a greenish gray, as I recall. Yeah.
You can't tell that in the black and white film, but, and there's Roger.
Yeah, Roger.
Oh boy, that was a good
Roger
one.
McGovern.
And Betty Ellen Hawhey. See, a lot of people thought Betty Ellen Hawhey was the lady who ate the bug from the tree, but she was not. I was the lady who ate the bug from the tree. I was filling in because we were short on ghouls that night, so I did a little extra role as a bug-eating ghoul. And I don't think I have one of those here.
Yeah.
Oh, and Chuck Craig.
Chuck Craig, yes.
That was a great one, Carl. And our honeymoon couple.
Yes, they went off the bridge, at Chappaquiddick or something like that.
Yeah.
No, I don't think that came later.
And this was more subtle makeup. This was Rich Sanderson. And this is as the film progressed, and we were using less of the, the black around the eyes. And he looks really good. He made a great ghoul.
I forget how he died now, but it died leaving him a very dark gray.
He looked good.
Yeah, that was...
And Miss December.
Miss December.
That was Paula Richards. She was our receptionist.
Yes, at the time, yes.
At the studio. So she was our first lady ghoul, wearing a sheet, which she devised herself, because we also did the costumes, which came mostly from Goodwill.
And at the bottom of many people's closets, things that have been discarded or were, excuse me, were about to be discarded.
And Keith Wayne, of course, he didn't have ghoul makeup. He was a great-looking guy, still is a great-looking guy. He's a chiropractor now. So we just did straight makeup for Keith.
So
lots of memories.
Many, many memories indeed.
Hot summer days, doing the makeup under the tree with the mosquitoes and the gnats.
And it was difficult because the makeup would have to wear off and we'd have to refresh it periodically.
And we didn't have running water, so we had to carry little thermoses of water, which were for both drinking and makeup.
Yes.
Whichever came first.
Which we tried to keep separate, of course.
The whole newsroom environment was created at your recording studio.
Hardin Associates.
Right.
At,
with real professional enunciatorial types.
Yes. people who...
And it looked good, you know, because we had that big control room deck that looked down into the studios on both sides. So it looked real.
But great. Those sequences are often talked about as some of the stuff that really plays, you know, the news,
authentically.
the newsreel stuff, and you know, announcing the rescue centers and all that. And Chuck, didn't Chuck write his own copy? I mean, he was a news guy, and he wrote his own copy.
Chuck Craig, that's right.
It has been established that persons who have recently died have been returning to life and committing acts of murder. A widespread investigation of reports from funeral homes, morgues, and hospitals has concluded that the unburied dead are coming back to life and seeking human victims.
The thing about the names of the towns at the bottom of the screen was another attempt on our part to make sure that maybe the picture would attract some attention, because we picked real towns in the Pittsburgh area, thinking, you know, well, people that see Clairton up there, or McKeesport, Glassport, they're going to talk about that and get us some word of mouth. I don't know if it worked, but we were calculating every single shot that we could.
Didn't work real well in Indianapolis or Chicago.
No, they hated it. They didn't know any of the names of the towns.
There's a number of scenes that stand out that are particularly terrifying for me. One was just a moment where Barbara is looking down at this corpse, and suddenly it jerks to life. But then we realize it's not alive. Dwayne, the actor, is actually pulling this body away. It was just a great frightening moment and a good switch around reveal that it wasn't really coming back to life.
Well, there's a, you know, the whole picture just seems to roll as a sort of a continuous wave over you, but, you know, certainly that opening in the cemetery.
The guy with the, who was, I think, the zombie in the graveyard, that they're coming to get you, Barbara, bit, that whole sequence, that's what pretty much made me turn off the television. I was too frightened to continue watching it.
I think when the arms were reaching into the house and they were fending them off, that was another horrifying moment.
There's several key scenes that I personally like, but one of the ones I think to me that's the most frightening is the boyfriend and girlfriend who are trying to get the truck, and they're going to the truck, and they gotta go get the gas, and the girl, I want to come with you, and so they're going along, and he brings a girl, and I had a crush on that girl. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I thought she was cute. She was quite a babe. Anyway, so, and the dopey boyfriend, and they go, and she screws up, and the truck blows up, and I was just shocked. How can they kill these characters? And they were the first of the major characters that you really liked that got killed, and I was just blown away. Not only because I had an affection for this girl, of course, but also I couldn't believe that could be done in a movie like this, that they would just kill off these characters that I was starting to like.
They're coming to get you. I don't know. There are many things. I couldn't come up with one.
The little child in the cellar, when she came back, that was really bad, really scary. I mean, a really bad time for me as a kid.
At the time, the thing that struck me, there were some shots that are very clumsy, artless, but in fact make them more powerful, which is people chewing on like pieces of meat or livers or something. And it was just, you didn't see that stuff in movies at that time. Or at least I hadn't seen it up to that point.
When it's not so bad that they couldn't get away, but they chose to just kind of, you know, they set a chair on fire and kick it out front. And I mean, there's about 30 minutes in the early part of the film where they don't have to stay. They could try to, it wasn't so bad that they could try to get away. And there's just this sort of that indecisiveness and the people trying to make a decision what's best for their own well-being. That's just kind of, that's really unsettling, because you're just terrified that they're not making the right decision, and you kind of know, since this movie's called Night of the Living Dead, that they're not going to be making the right decision. And I think there's a mood or something, sort of an air of suspense and dread in those early first 30, 40 minutes. I think that's probably really impressive.
I get a lot of images that are like, it's like a montage that goes all the way through the film, because at times I felt like some of the imagery in the graveyard in the opening, some of the very spooky, wonderful black and white. At times it looked like this could be a Bergman movie, you know, and the whole film, I think, in its thematically what it's doing affected me, as well as it scared the hell out of me, and I loved being afraid and listening to the response of the audience, because in those days they truly blurted out the screams.
I remember turning off the television and then like watching pro wrestling for about half an hour, 40 minutes, and I said, well, maybe I'll give it a second chance, and I flipped the channel back, and I remember the sequence where the girl with the trowel goes after the mother, and the screaming and the blood against the wall. Very effective, very frightening, and definitely made an impression on me, and pretty much was probably the most frightening and most graphic of any film I had seen up to that point. I didn't realize films could go that far, and they did, and I was pretty shocked.
I'm sitting here, Carl, looking over your shoulder and wondering, tell me, could it be that that's the coat rack?
This is the coat rack with which I, want to touch it, anyone? With which I wrestled when I was shot by Dwayne/Ben in the film.
And you still have it after all these years?
Oh, yes. Well, we have a few artifacts like that.
And how many times
I'm one. There's another.
How many times did you drag that thing?
Oh, gee, George,
how many times did we shoot your death
I
scene?
know. I thought I was going to have a heart attack and die from laughter.
Oh,
Because I was thrown back when I was shot, and I lurched over and I tangled with with that, and it had coats on it. It had coats on it, and I got tangled up in the coats.
Right at the top of the
at the top of the steps,
stairs.
and the thing kept following me down into the stairwell.
We were never able to untangle him, and he went home with it. And there it is.
Yeah, that's right. There it is.
But that was one that went forever. There was something else. What was the big? Oh gosh.
I know we had the
you mean another sequence?
Yeah.
One was when I threw the torches out,
Molotov.
the Molotov cocktails out of the second. I was trying to hit a stone down there, and sometimes I hit it.
And sometimes you hit Gary.
The audacity, you know,
you mean you had to
the
hit
lunacy.
the stone
You know, I was aiming
the
for a
bottle
stone.
had to break, so
Right.
you had to hit a stone.
A stone.
That the audience couldn't see was
That's
there.
right. And you know, I just can't believe to this day that I really thought that I could hit a stone which was maybe, 24 inches across from the second floor window over the porch roof.
Right.
Well, is it coming? Come on. Get in.
I remember George and I sitting around the night before, and I said, George, you know, Carl threw all those Molotov cocktails out the window, and there are all these zombies that are supposed to be weak and slow moving, and yet none of them catch on fire. That's ridiculous. Somebody has to catch on fire.
You, Jack.
Who's going to do it? I said,
Where is
well,
Jack?
I will.
Great idea, Jack.
Yeah, good idea. Jeez. How do you think we can pull that off?
We didn't have an asbestos suit, or didn't have money for anything like that, so I just...
You put on three or four layers of
I had some tight-fitting denim clothing and a loose brown suit over that.
Yeah, and then a jacket over that.
And the idea, no, just a denim jacket, denim Levi's, and then the brown suit.
And then a brown suit on top of that.
So you made we had a puddle of gasoline on the ground, and you made a trail of gasoline from my back down my leg.
That's right.
And so on action, you threw the match into the puddle ignited and straight up my back, and the plan was for me to just stagger in flames as far as I could until I fell over a hill where people were waiting to smother me, the flames with a blanket. And I just went until I felt my hair burning.
Just keep on going until
and
you
everybody
hear George
was
say cut.
It was the looks on people's face were really weird. Like
it was
you and George, because I could see this worried look mixed with glee that we're actually getting this great shot.
I still have that. I still get that weird look on my face anytime I see a person on fire.
Part of you enjoys it, and
Just-
part of you.
yeah, just-
But we got 3 takes on the thing.
Yes, we did.
It worked.
Well, I was worried because that was a spooky thing because you know, we had never done that before, and by dang, you was on fire. Yes.
There were interesting things to me. The night, for example, that the getaway truck blew up. I think it was a real stroke of good fortune that we found 2 trucks that matched identically. One of them didn't have, in Evans City, Pennsylvania, who would guess that you could find 2 identical trucks that matched, and one didn't operate, it had to be towed. That's the one that blew up.
Mm-hmm.
But the night that sequence was filmed, I can remember being astounded at the number of people who showed up. And I mean, as I recall, it was like 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that when that eventually filmed, and there were people out with, you know, huddled in blankets and everything else. That kind of surprised me, that people would be that interested to see a movie being made in their backyard.
Well, I think that's the reason. You know, it was in their view, this was a real big-time movie. And they hadn't ever seen anything like that before. So, dang, we got to go out there and watch him burn that truck. They're going to do that tonight. One of the really unpleasant things that I recall was the sanitary facilities, remember, which were non-existent. There was
non-existent,
an
yeah.
outhouse, and there was
That's
a
for
pump,
sure.
wasn't there?
Right.
And you had to, if you wanted to use the John outhouse, you had to carry a bucket of water with you.
We used to carry 50-gallon or 30-gallon garbage cans full of water from a place about 100 yards away and down the hill.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then we'd fill the back of the commode so that when you hit the handle, something would be in there.
Vince did double duty on all of that
All
stuff.
of that,
though.
absolutely.
Yes, he did.
And he was the only guy willing to go down. He was the only guy who took a bath during the whole production, I think, because he was willing to jump into that cold river in November.
Well, we took baths, but we had to heat the water.
Heat the water.
You
Vince
and Vince
just went
and I
right
and
to the
Gary
river.
lived there for the most part.
Yeah.
And then we'd heat
I did
up
bathe.
enough water to take cat baths and
Right.
and we had
sleeping on those couches, and we had these dummies and mannequins around. Remember that. And every once in a while, there were a few incidents where kids from town would come out at night, you know, like to bring their date out to show them these like weird looking mannequins that were inside this house where they were shooting the movie.
They were all made up as zombies with ping pong ball eyes. We used them.
The kids
for,
or the mannequins?
like setting them on fire.
kids,
And But the other thing that cracked me up was when we had those. We slept on army surplus cots, and every day, when George climbed into his cot, he'd say, "This'll never hold me," and then he'd lie down and go to sleep.
And it would hold him.
And after about 10 times of this, he said, "This'll never hold me," and he went down right through the cot, through the canvas and everything. He's on the floor with his feet sticking up in the air.
I was right.
That's
all
how
along.
you ended up on the couch.
That's how I ended up on the couch. Right. I was a large enough object that I got the couch.
This is the original disc, one of the original discs from the soundtrack.
But we did so much to them, to change them,
Yes,
to alter, electronically change them.
We changed the speed. We used a feedback echo. That's from the playback head back to the record head, and then we also used the echo chamber, the real live echo chamber.
And this music, even in 1967, was very old, because when we reported the use of this music to Capitol library, they wrote back and said, "Where did you get those discs? They're so old. After you use them, please return them to us."
That's right. That's right. I've
Because
forgotten that.
the composer or whomever was supposed to get royalties from it had long died, and they didn't have any way of handling.
So it's old. But anyway, we did modify the music greatly, and the initial, this is probably interesting, the initial selection of the music tracks was up to us. George Romero said, "Why don't you pick some discs, something that you feel might fit, and make a collection, and then we'll listen to them." And we gave him the final decision on what to use and what not to use. Now you'll hear...
ZR2.
That was the voice of Capitol Records Music Library, identifying the cut. At any rate, then George came up, we all listened to the stuff, and he said, "I like this, 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 and this." And then we proceeded to modify the music, to add echo and do the things I said before.
The music is, I think, is a big contributor to the feeling of Living Dead. You know, that kind of gothic,
Yeah, it is.
old-fashioned terror.
Well, that was really our frame of reference.
That's right.
At the time, because nobody had done anything like this. Our frame of reference had to be the Frankensteins, the Mummy pictures, and this music is from that era. So I guess you would say it's music of the what, 40s, 50s, thereabouts? Brought forward in time. And even today, they're still using similar music.
Yeah.
It's more modern. Arrangements are more modern, but it is very similar. So it's interesting. Night of the Living Dead.
Forever.
I think it was kind of interesting also, the lucky coincidence of the finding duplicate trucks, but also the finding a place, finding a house.
Yes.
That was going to be torn down, so it didn't make any difference what we did to the place, because once we were finished with it, they were going to knock it down anyway, and I think it today, still to this day, is a turf farm.
Yes,
they
it
grow
is.
grass there.
The last
Well,
time.
I mean, a lot of that's luck, but I mean, and on a serious note, really the way it happened was tenacity. I mean, we were going to get that movie made some
One
damn
way or
another.
whatever it
And I
takes,
think it was really at the core of the group, not all 10, but at least 7 or 8 of us were
determined
to make the movie.
Yeah, because we did look at a number of houses, and Carl and Marilyn found one, and the ceilings were too low, and we could have gone with it and suffered through the hand, but we hung in there till we found a place that was exactly right. And of course we had to fix it up.
You couldn't get to it in a vehicle.
That's right.
And Vince went out there and built a bridge over the thing, and he found old antique furniture and fixed the. I mean,
And he made a fireplace where there wasn't a fireplace.
Right.
And he made the
And created a door,
door to the basement
door,
where there wasn't even a basement. So it was, and then just furnishing it with things like your coat tree.
Yes.
You know,
And
it's
your antique radios, and
Oh, the
all
old
of us
Zenith,
brought stuff
yes.
out there, and we bought stuff from Goodwill, and before you knew it, the place was looked
was
like
furnished
it was,
and looked like an
real.
old farmhouse.
Right.
I wonder how much a group like this, an entrepreneurial group like this, is responsible for what has happened in general to movie making and the cost of production. You know, as recently as the remake in a couple of years ago, I think at its largest there were like 115 people on the crew, and you kind of stand around and scratch your head if you have that perspective of being involved in the original movie, and then you stand around and you say, well, geez, 115 people, that's more than we had in the cast in the first film, including the posse and everybody else. And you say, I wonder, you know, how much are we really buying here? You know, it's
well, you know, you can't. I mean, the problem is I mean, theoretically, we shouldn't have been able to do it either. I mean, it's what we were saying before. We had equipment, we had the tenacity, were willing to go out there and spend all that time when, you know, when we all had, or were trying to. I mean, you guys had a really going business at the time. We had one that we were trying to get going, and we you know, we all should have probably been back in town looking for the next client. But, you know, I think just that drive and desire and, you know, just took it over the top. And
that
I think
energy,
plus the fact that, you know, we also, I think, did in the end wind up doing it, you know, pretty democratically. I mean, you know, because initially you were going to direct, and I mean, then I wound up directing and all this stuff. I mean, we avoided big fights.
I'd drag you out there and feed you those things.
Well, it had a profound effect on my life. I'd made a film called Eggshells. It was my first feature-length film. It was about the disintegration of hippiedom, and the troops were coming home from Vietnam. And the film played the art house circuits. It didn't get many play dates. And so a friend of mine suggested I go to the Student Union to see the 16mm print of this film called Night of the Living Dead. And I went, and the response from the audience told me what kind of film, the genre that I should get into, how I can make a low-budget film without stars or, you know, or a great deal of money that it was accessible to me. And so as a result of seeing that film, and with that sophisticated audience, I decided to do a horror film. And it was, I don't know, it was some months later, I guess, that the Chainsaw, or that the story that became Chainsaw evolved.
Because it was the scariest movie I'd ever seen, when it came time for my partners, Robert Tappert, Bruce Campbell, and myself, to make our first horror film, we drew upon Night of the Living Dead a great deal, and it influenced our movie Evil Dead quite a bit. In Night of the Living Dead, the horror all takes place in one deserted farmhouse, and so we also decided that's a good and cheap place to make a picture. I guess a lot of horror filmmakers finally come to that conclusion, but nevertheless for us, it was Romero who had influenced us, and we saw how effective that was. Some place out in the middle of nowhere. The isolation factor was very good. So the location was influenced in our film by Night of the Living Dead.
The regional filmmakers seem to be making the most cutting-edge horror films. Well, maybe that's a contradiction in terms, for the simple fact that all horror films, to be any good, have to be cutting-edge, because everybody is trying to push the envelope when it comes to horror and shock and mood and just the whole avant-garde and the whole rebellious sort of filmmaking that happens in the horror genre. With Night of the Living Dead, it became such a big hit and became so memorable with that great title and it being a great movie that filmmakers felt that their films, the regional films, could do that kind of business. And I remember a lot of people trying to do that kind of film, and they were retitling, I think, European films, House of the Living Dead and Fangs of the Living Dead, and everything was The Living Dead.
Well, I think it's given it a great shot in the arm because it was a crossover film for a lot of people, including myself, who consider myself sort of educated and hoping to go off and do sort of art films, you know. Suddenly I realized that it was possible to have art that also had a visceral quality to it and could make you jump and sweat and run and laugh. And it sort of released me, you know. I think I might have been doomed to making very serious films before seeing that film, and then suddenly I realized, no, you can just let your hair down and have a lot of fun and still do something that had meaning to it. And I think it was the same for a lot of the audience, and therefore for the whole genre. It released it from just being pulpy, done by, say, cigar smokers who were just trying to exploit, and released it into guys who had ideas and women who liked to have fun at it, but were actual filmmakers that went out there with the camera themselves and got their hands dirty and did the editing themselves.
Well, in many ways, actually. I mean, I think that films can be influential for good and for bad. I mean, I made a movie called Animal House that was so influential that I think it was horrible. I mean, I kept thinking, do I get residuals from all these rip-offs and stuff? But I mean, it was so, and Night of the Living Dead inspired so many films.
Plus, I think a lot of the makeup. Tom Sullivan did the makeup in our Evil Dead, and it is fairly similar to the very simple makeup that Romero went with on Night of the Living Dead. Plus, just the concept of The Walking Dead as the source of horror was ripped off. I mean, I was paying homage to Romero when we made Evil Dead.
Well, I think everybody who was started out, and a lot of people have made zombie movies, I have made one, and I worked on one called Shockwaves, would like to capture some of that film in one of their films. I think we would all like to be able to generate that type of terror in our audiences, and I didn't do it. I did not achieve that that level, which I think just goes to show you that there's a lot more to the film than a bunch of actors stumbling up on a porch and trying to get through the window, because that same film seemed to be made with Vincent Price much earlier in Italy as Last Man on Earth, and even though that was very creepy, it didn't generate the same response. So I don't think just having a bunch of zombies lumbering around is going to do it. There's something more, there's something magical, and maybe it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing.
Just in terms of breaking new ground, in terms of how far you can go with the gore, I can't quite name, there's so many films, almost too numerous to mention. I mean, films, the Evil Dead films, the Peter Jackson's Brain Dead, I believe. It's ridiculous. There are homages, and it's amazing. It truly is in so many ways, the impact that film has had.
Like George was saying, our businesses were on hold. Our businesses weren't on hold. Our entire lives were on hold during that period through getting the commercial business going and making our first feature and so on. We just didn't live like normal people. We put everything we had into the film business.
It truly was a group effort, a democratic group effort, but there was also a great deal of raw talent there, a great deal of raw talent, which I don't think we should discount.
Oh, yeah.
All of us involved.
No.
Had
Good
talents.
instincts to start off with.
And there is a tendency to do that. I mean, I always say, geez, it's hard for me to even watch the movie still because all I see are the flaws. But then every once in a while I get, much mellower towards it, and I have really fond memories of all of that. And I think it is true that we did a good job given under the circumstances.
Yes.
We did a fabulous job. I mean, it's like, and the movie works. It does work.
It
and
does
you tend
work.
to forget that because you get critical of it and you say, and you start thinking of what happened and this and that, and it should have been that. And but it works.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're ignorant.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're acting like a child.
They're coming for you. Look, there comes one of them now.
I worked with practically everybody in the film. Carl Hardman, Marilyn Eastman, George, Jack, Russ. We all did voiceover work, television, commercial work together in Pittsburgh. I went out to Hollywood back in 66, 67. Shortly, I'd say about a month or so while I was out there, I got a call from Carl saying, "We're going to make a film. Would you like to come home and audition for it?" So I flew back from Hollywood to Pittsburgh, ended up getting the part of Barbara, and the rest is history. I played her as she was written. We did a lot of improvisation shooting. We'd have certain dialogue written. There was the working script. But oftentimes we discussed what was to happen in the scene, then improvised the dialogue. For example, the segment where Barbara is sitting down telling Ben about the candy, Johnny being attacked, and she's hot, she undoes her jacket, that kind of thing. She tells the entire story. That was all ad lib. I remember we did everything in one take. Oh, he was wonderful. Very willing to listen to ideas. He had, I believe, distinct ideas, images, how he wanted it done or how he saw it, but very flexible. We didn't have a lot of stock, film stock to burn. We had to really keep everything concise. I remember he taught me how to change the film, load the camera in a bag right there on set. He was marvelous. A very creative, intense, down-to-earth guy. To this day, he is. I was running to the gas pump. The gas pump we thought was firmly attached. George, again, was shooting up. He was kneeling down with the camera right in front of the gas pump. I came running into that pump, hit the pump. It was just sitting there. It wasn't bolted. The thing, heavy sucker, nearly fell on top of George, squishing the fella to death. But it was averted. We caught the thing. He wasn't hurt. Watching it at the premiere, I just marveled that all the takes that we did could be put together into something that, even though it didn't cost $1 million to make, said something, and it held your interest. There were some beautiful shots. When I say beautiful, you wonder how could it be beautiful in a horror film? But really, the shadows that George figured out to create certain effects, I thought it was great. One of my favorites to this day is the shot where George is on the ground, he's shooting up, there's the little music box. Barbara comes by and she touches the top of it. The little doors open. George shoots through it, and just as the little doors open, you see Barbara's face looking through. You can see her eyes in that horror state. Then the little doors close again. I thought that was an exquisite shot. We had a wonderful time. I met Patricia Tallman. We all went to the premiere up in San Jose, had a great time. The remake surprised me. Barbara ends up with an Uzi and fatigues, mowing them all down. In a way, I'm sorry that they did that. To me, it wasn't a remake then. Even though it was in the 90s, and yes, women were going to control the world, or kick-started their Harleys and roared down the freeway. But I was sorry to see that we changed it that much. But boy, color, effects, far superior to ours. I think it stands out because it truly was one of the first films where the good guys didn't survive. Up to that point in time, if you had a white hat on, no matter what chased you, no matter how horrible the situation, you always ended up alive with that white hat on. In Night of the Living Dead, didn't work out that way. The good people you were hoping would survive. You always thought, they're going to make it. At least Ben's going to make it. Didn't. That, I believe, was the profound effect the movie had. It helped change the way horror films were made.
Chief, if I were surrounded by 6 or 8 of these things, would I stand a chance with them?
Well, there's no problem. If you had a gun, shoot him in the head. That's a sure way to kill him. If you don't, get yourself a club or a torch. Beat him or burn him. They go up pretty easy.
Well, Chief McClellan, how long do you think it will take you until you get the situation under control?
Well, that's pretty hard to say. We don't know how many of them there are. We know when we find them, we can kill them.
Are they slow-moving, Chief?
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Well, they were really good days. They were deadly in many respects, but they were great. They really were great.
I think it was also...
I remember how many people really cooperated with us and came out, people from advertising, people that we worked with. I mean, there were hundreds of people. The big days, those big days with the helicopter, the IIC, cooperation from IIC, and your friends in the biz and our friends in the biz that came out, painted, you know, the ambulance. I remember that ambulance. That was the first major prop that I was ever within 10 feet of in my life.
Oh,
and it was
yeah.
like, God, it's
whoa, check it out, man.
This looks real.
You're talking about the blue Mercury.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was
Did I ever tell you the story of that? Yeah, I borrowed that car from a Lincoln dealer who's no longer in business. Can't think of the name now.
Probably because of giving you the car, and then I think the story you're going to tell behind it.
Well, you know, I probably did tell you, but it was Willard. Willard.
Right, that's right. The town of Willard. Willard. I don't know.
Anyway, the sign on. We had a black sign made.
Right.
No, it was painted right on the car.
Painted on the car.
It was painted on the car.
Washable.
That's why it looked so great.
Paint.
None of this.
Took the car back.
Stuff.
They removed the black paint, Willard, and it didn't disappear. There was a faint image of Willard. So they had to
This
wind
guy's
up.
name was not Willard, I take it.
No, it wasn't. They had to wind up painting both sides of that station wagon, and they were really hacked.
Yeah, they were not really thrilled.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, apparently something in the pigmentation of the paint left enough of a residual image that you trying to pass this off as a brand spanking new car. Why does it say Willard on the side?
Well, you see, the police department bought it, and then they never drove it out of here.
And I think that there are little moments like that that we have all forgotten about. That kind of make
the
that.
Washington D.C. segment was almost the same thing where
it was just like a pic. I remember it was like
we
a
were
picnic.
all in
We
the
got in a bunch of
downstairs.
cars and drove down there. And
we were in the
shot down in
downstairs
16,
studio
right?
before that wasn't in the script to go to Washington.
No, I know.
And
I'm trying to remember. We just jumped in the cars. We shot that with eclairs, right? 16.
Yes.
Yeah, we shot with right.
At least
Eclair and the
was it shot with an eclair? I don't know.
Yeah, because it was going to go in the. It was going to go in the television, be matted into the television screen. So we figured we might as well shoot 16 and save some money. But we didn't. We started thinking, well, what can this sequence be? And we have a whole movie where people don't even come out of this farmhouse, and yet this is supposed to be happening on a national, if not worldwide scale. And so how can we indicate that? And I think I was the first person to mention, well, let's just go to Washington, D.C. Zap. Next morning, Carl had his car made up.
Slap some flags on Carl's car.
I don't know what you went through to do that.
I wanted to go to Afghanistan, and no, it couldn't possible.
Remember,
Well,
you,
you were
had,
always
you
a
had a
little
big
weird.
Lincoln, didn't you?
Yeah,
Carl?
you had the Lincoln
Yeah,
that
that
we
was
put
Carl's.
the
That was
flags
your
on.
car. That's in the
65 Lincoln
scene, right?
that looked great.
The same car we went to the drive-in in, I
That's
think.
right. Well, it had to be, sure.
Well, then you had to make flags
Had the
because
flags
it had to be
made.
the general's car.
Right.
Right.
And I dug out my old Army uniform so
Yes,
I could
you-
be the driver.
You were the driver.
Right.
And we got this rented
Well, and somehow
costume for the
convinced
general.
Al to come down there with us.
Yeah. We had trouble.
Well, the whole impersonating an officer issue did come up.
That's right.
Yeah, what are you doing?
And we didn't have.
well, we got this
We didn't
general.
have a uniform.
Well, because we wanted
Could
to be
not-
within sight of the Capitol.
Right.
Not, I mean, that's the whole reason for going down there. So
In
we wanted that
a
in the shot.
restricted area, and somebody.
Well, the
We didn't call
security.
the Washington cops either.
I wonder how many
security guard-
We're
fans.
not going to call Pittsburgh police. Why would we call the Washington?
I wonder how many people realize that's where George has a cameo.
I was going to say, I wonder for the real trivia buffs, that's for
Like
a guy who touched every frame of the movie. It's the only scene in the movie that he shows up in.
And we did that
That's
on
right.
purpose. You stick a microphone into the general's face or into the
Right.
scientist's face.
Remember when Dwayne walloped me with the board?
Yeah.
He walloped you.
I was shooting.
Yeah,
He,
I
he
know.
swings
Whack.
this big wooden board that he takes. I think he's swinging it at you. I guess.
Yeah, I think it's
Or
a
is he?
Carl.
No, he's,
Right.
he's at the.
Oh,
It's when he knocks the rifle out of your hand.
out of
That's
your
right.
hand.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was down shooting, and I was handheld sort of on my knees, and I went like this, and he swung the board at you, and he got the camera, bang, which got me.
Yikes.
Really,
Everybody got into
everybody
it.
involved just got into it totally.
Yeah. Well, it was before, the Chicago Sun-Times said to the world that we were bastards for
Right.
How low will people sink to make a buck? But I think it's all that stuff that was really lucky stuff for the movie. I mean,
Yeah.
we were getting attention for, that, and then, then remember we thought it was over. Remember we said, oh, hey, we did pretty good, and then all of a sudden France and they started to show it when they re-released it under Slaves over here.
Yeah.
It was like it came back from the dead. I remember when we went out in your big car and took a little, I think a jug of something to drink, and went out to a drive-in to see the movie. It was one of the most thrilling.
I don't remember that.
You don't remember? See, it's too late. I remember we went out in your car to a drive-in to watch this movie, and this was our movie on a real drive-in screen, and we didn't have to run the projector. And there was
Hey, Vince, Al, you want to get about 4 or 5 men and a couple dogs? There's a house over here behind those trees. We want to go check it out. You still here, Bill?
Yeah, Chief, we're going to stay with it till we meet up with the National Guard.
Where'd you get the coffee?
One of the volunteers, you're doing all the work, you take it.
Thank you.
And really, in retrospect, given the times, given the anger of the times, and given what then subsequently did happen with, the King assassination and the riots and all of that. I mean, boy, if we had ended it any other way, it would be hard for us to hold our heads up in a way.
Yeah.
But we weren't out to make a heavy statement, as I recall. It was like,
Well, again, and you were the guy that kept bringing that back too. We didn't want that. We didn't want to get carried away in politics. But we used to bullshit a lot on those cots about that stuff. But we always wanted to do it as a roller coaster ride and never let go of the roller coaster ride.
I
Jack
remember
was the guy that kept saying, it's got to be a roller.
Well, I had an Invasion of the Body Snatchers in mind when I walked into that movie not knowing what it was going to be about, and I came out utterly stunned because the ending was uncompromising, at least the ending I saw. And I said if we could make the audience come out with those same stunned looks on their face, then we'd have a successful movie.
Yeah. You, drag that out of here and throw it on the fire. Nothing down here. All right, go ahead down and give him a hand. Let's go check out the house, man. There's something there. I heard a noise. All right, Vince, hit him in the head, right between the eyes. Good shot. Okay, he's dead. Let's go get him. That's another one for the fire.
This is what kind of brought it all to a final focal point for me. You know, being inducted into the Horror Hall of Fame. How much did that cost us?